It was a quiet Sunday afternoon on the outskirts of Los Angeles. The kind of day where the air smells of gasoline, sun-baked asphalt, and the faint hum of freedom. Steven Seagal, dressed in his signature all-black outfit, leather jacket, shades, and boots, rode his Harley down a stretch of open road, heading toward a small roadside diner he'd visited countless times before. For him, it wasn't about fame or attention. He just liked simple places where he could drink coffee, talk to locals, and stay grounded. As he pulled into the diner's gravel parking lot, the low rumble of his engine drew a few glances. But almost immediately after he parked, another sound filled the air, louder, harsher. The roar of 6 motorcycles echoing through the open space. A group of bikers rolled in, engines growling like thunder. Their leather jackets were patched with skulls and slogans, their laughter sharp and careless. They parked in a line blocking half the entrance. When they spotted Seagull, one of them smirked. "Nice bike, old man," one shouted. "You sure you can handle that thing?" Steven didn't even look at them at first. He calmly took off his gloves, set them on the seat, and removed his sunglasses. His face was relaxed, unreadable. The bikers didn't like that. They wanted a reaction. Another one walked closer. "We're talking to you, Grandpa," he said, his tone thick with mockery. "You deaf or just too scared to answer?" Steven finally turned his head, and slowly, deliberately. His eyes, calm but sharp, met theirs. "I heard you," he said simply. "I just didn't think it was worth replying to." The bikers laughed. To them, this was entertainment. They had no idea who they were dealing with. No clue that this quiet man had trained in martial arts for decades, earned a 7th Dan black belt in Aikido, and once trained law enforcement officers in hand-to-hand defense. But they were about to find out. One of them spat on the ground and stepped closer, his shadow falling across Seagal's boots. "Big mistake coming here, old man," he growled. Steven didn't flinch. He just tilted his head slightly and said, "Maybe. Or maybe it's yours." What happened next left the entire diner speechless. The diner had gone silent. Through the large front windows, customers watched the scene unfold like a movie. Forks froze midair, and even the cook stopped flipping burgers. Everyone could feel it. That electric charge before something big happens. The lead biker, a burly man with a jagged scar across his cheek, took a step closer to Steven Seagal. His boots crunched against the gravel. "You got some kind of attitude problem, huh?" he said, puffing his chest. "Think you're better than us?" Steven didn't respond. He simply stood there, his arms relaxed by his sides, his gaze unwavering. Years of martial discipline had taught him the same truth over and over. The louder a man yells, the more afraid he is inside. The biker's friends chuckled and spread out, surrounding Steven's bike. One of them, younger, hot-headed, full of adrenaline, tapped the handlebars of Seagal's Harley. "Nice ride," he said mockingly. "Be a shame if something happened to it." A few customers gasped from inside the diner. One elderly man muttered, "They don't know who they're messing with." The waitress, wide-eyed, whispered, "That's Steven Seagal." But the bikers didn't believe it. "Steven Seagal?" The scar-faced leader snorted. "Yeah, right. That guy's an actor, not some biker." The others laughed, egging each other on. Steven adjusted his stance slightly, not aggressively but balanced, centered. Anyone trained in martial arts would have recognized it instantly, the posture of someone in control. "I don't want trouble," Steven said finally, his voice calm but firm. "You should go enjoy your day." That tone, calm but confident, was like fuel on their fire. The leader sneered. "Or what? You gonna hit me, Hollywood?" He shoved Steven's shoulder. "Nothing." Steven didn't move an inch. That made the biker pause for half a second. His buddies whistled and laughed to keep the momentum going. "Hey, Scar, looks like the old man's made of stone," one shouted. Steven just looked at the man squarely and said, "Walk away while you can." The leader blinked, caught off guard by how calm that sounded. Then, trying to save face, he grabbed Steven's jacket collar. In a single fluid motion, too fast for most to see, Steven's hand shot up, gripping the biker's wrist. He twisted it slightly. The biker winced, a flash of pain shooting through his arm. Seagal didn't apply full force, just enough pressure to remind him who was in control. "Let go," Steven said quietly. The man's hand opened involuntarily, his face twisting in shock. Inside the diner, someone whispered, "Oh my God, did you see that?" Steven released the biker and took a small step back, giving him space. He wasn't there to hurt anyone, but he wasn't about to be bullied either. The biker looked down at his wrist, disbelief on his face. "What the hell was that?" he muttered. One of the other bikers, trying to laugh it off, barked, "Come on, Scar, don't let that old man punk you." Scar glared at Steven. "You think you're tough, huh?" Steven simply replied, "No, I just know what I'm capable of." The air grew heavy. The tension was suffocating. Even the sound of cicadas had stopped. That's when one of the younger bikers pulled out his phone and said, half-jokingly, "Man, I'm recording this. Nobody's gonna believe what's about to happen." Steven turned his head slightly, his gaze steady but expression calm. "I wouldn't," he said, almost whispering. "Things can change very fast." A low murmur rippled through the crowd inside the diner. Every customer was pressed against the glass, watching history in motion. The bikers shifted nervously. They couldn't explain it, but something about Seagull's energy made them hesitate. There was no fear in his eyes, no trace of panic, just stillness, the kind of stillness that comes from total control. Scar stepped back, shaking his hand out. "You're lucky I'm in a good mood," he grunted. Steven tilted his head. "You sure about that?" The tension was about to explode, and the crowd knew it. Have you ever seen someone stay completely calm when others try to provoke them? Tell me what you would have done, and let me know which country or city you're watching from right now. Scar laughed bitterly, trying to brush off the pain in his wrist. "You think you're some kind of fighter, huh?" he said. Steven gave a small, knowing smile. "Not a fighter," he said softly. "A teacher," the leader frowned. "A teacher of what?" Seagull's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "Of consequences," the laughter died. No one knew why, but suddenly none of the bikers felt like joking anymore. What Steven did next made every single person in that diner hold their breath. The diner door creaked open as a few curious onlookers stepped outside, drawn by the thick cloud of tension in the parking lot. The bikers stood in a loose circle around Steven Seagal now, like wolves sizing up a calm but dangerous prey. No one spoke for a few seconds. The only sounds were the soft ticking of motorcycle engines cooling in the heat and the low rustle of wind against leather jackets. Scar, the biker leader, cracked his knuckles and spat on the ground. "You talk too much, old man," he said, stepping forward. "Let's see what you can actually do." Steven didn't move. He simply adjusted his stance slightly, his weight shifting effortlessly onto the balls of his feet. It was subtle, but anyone with a trained eye could see it. The transformation from civilian to martial artist had already begun. Scar lunged first, throwing a sloppy right hook aimed at Steven's head. But before his punch even landed, Steven's hand snapped up, catching Scar's wrist midair. With one smooth motion, he pivoted his body, redirecting the biker's own momentum. There was a sharp snap followed by a grunt of pain as Scar's arm twisted behind his back. It happened so fast the other bikers froze, unsure of what they'd just seen. Scar struggled, cursing under his breath. Steven released him gently and stepped back, completely calm. "I told you," he said quietly. "Don't touch people you don't understand." Scar stumbled backward, clutching his arm. His friends moved in instinctively, trying to look tough despite the fear flickering behind their eyes. One of them, a tall, bald man with tattoos covering both arms, growled, "You think you can take all of us?" Steven tilted his head slightly. "If you come one at a time, maybe." The crowd inside the diner erupted in whispers. Some pulled out their phones, recording. Others couldn't look away. Scar shouted, "Get him!" The bald biker charged in fast, wild, swinging both fists. Steven didn't retreat. Instead, he sidestepped and guided the man's arm forward, using his own energy against him. In a blur, the biker's momentum flipped him onto the gravel, his back hitting the ground with a heavy thud. The man groaned, clutching his shoulder. Steven looked down at him, expression unreadable. "Violence isn't strength," he said calmly. "Control is." Another biker cursed and lunged from behind. Steven's head turned just slightly. He stepped aside and caught the man's forearm mid-swing. In one swift motion, he turned, locked the elbow, and swept the man's legs out from under him. It looked effortless, almost graceful. By now, the entire diner had emptied into the parking lot. Phones were everywhere, capturing every second. Steven stood perfectly still and breathing slow, steady. Not a drop of sweat, not a trace of anger. Scar stumbled to his feet, his pride now fully shattered. "What the hell are you?" he shouted. Steven gave a faint smile. "Someone who doesn't need to prove anything." The crowd gasped when Scar, desperate to regain control, picked up a loose chain from the back of his bike. He swung it wildly toward Steven's head. Steven stepped forward instead of back, his hand catching the chain mid-swing. He twisted it around his wrist, pulling Scar closer in one sharp motion. Their faces were inches apart now. "You've already lost," Steven whispered. Scar froze. The chain slipped from his hand. Steven released him again and took a step back, his stance lowering. The fight was over, and everyone knew it. No one dared move. Even the younger bikers, who moments ago had been laughing, stood silently, eyes wide. Then, slowly, Steven turned his back on them. The ultimate act of confidence. He walked toward the diner entrance, calm as ever. Behind him, one of the fallen bikers groaned. "Who is this guy?" The old man who'd been watching from the diner doorway answered quietly. "That's Steven Seagal. And you're lucky he showed mercy. If you were standing there in that moment, what would you do? Would you step in or just record it like everyone else? Be honest, and let me know in the comments below." Scar bent down to help his friends up. None of them spoke. They were bruised, but mostly by humiliation, not pain. The crowd began to clap quietly, a slow wave of applause spreading through the diner parking lot. Steven paused before going back inside. He turned slightly, looking over his shoulder. "Go home," he said. "You've learned enough for today." Scar stared at him for a moment, then nodded slowly, a rare gesture of respect. The bikers mounted their motorcycles one by one, starting their engines. The roar filled the air again, but this time it didn't sound threatening. It sounded like retreat. As they sped off into the distance, the crowd erupted into cheers. Steven simply walked back into the diner, sat at his usual seat and said to the waitress, "Coffee, black." The waitress, still wide-eyed, smiled nervously. "You handled that pretty well," she said. Steven gave a soft shrug. "Handled what?" He took a slow sip of coffee as the murmurs outside faded away. What happened next made those bikers realize the full truth. They hadn't just threatened an actor. They had challenged a real martial arts legend. The diner buzzed with nervous laughter and shaky disbelief. Moments ago, everyone had been watching through the glass. Now they were talking all at once. "That was insane," one man whispered. He barely even moved. A woman near the counter said, "He stopped those bikers like they were kids." Steven Seagal sat quietly at his booth, sipping his black coffee as if nothing had happened. His breathing was calm, his eyes steady. A man completely at peace after chaos. Outside, the roar of engines faded into the distance as the biker gang disappeared down the highway. But they didn't ride far. Just a few miles away, Scar and his crew pulled over under a flickering gas station sign. For a long time, nobody spoke. The silence hung heavy in the air. Finally, one of the younger bikers, the one who had filmed the fight on his phone, muttered, "Man, I think we just got handled by that actor dude." Scar glared at him. "What are you talking about?" The biker held up his phone. "Look at this." He opened the video and replayed the moment when Steven had caught his punch mid-air. The movement was too clean, too fast, too controlled. Then came the flip. Scar's body twisting effortlessly like he'd been tossed by a ghost. Another biker leaned closer. "Wait, that's Steven Seagal, bro. From Under Siege, Above the Law, Hard to Kill. That guy's a real martial artist." Scar frowned, sweat dripping down his temple. "You're saying that was really him?" "Yeah," said the younger biker. "He's not just an actor. He's trained in Aikido for like decades. 7th degree black belt. Used to train cops and military too." For a few seconds, the group went completely silent. The only sound was the buzz of the gas station light. Scar rubbed his wrist, still sore from the twist Seagal had used on him. The pain was proof enough. "Guess we picked the wrong guy to mess with," he muttered, shaking his head. Back at the diner, word had already begun to spread online. The footage from several phones was hitting social media faster than anyone could keep up. Within minutes, hashtags like Steven Seagal real-life fight and calm power were trending. The waitress walked over to Steven's booth, holding her phone with both hands. Mr. Seagal," she said softly. "You're going viral right now." Steven looked up, his expression unreadable. "Again?" he said, almost amused. She laughed nervously. "You really showed them." He set down his cup and replied calmly, "No, I showed them restraint." That answer hit her harder than any punch could have. It wasn't about winning. It was about control. Meanwhile, at the gas station, the bikers were glued to the same videos. Comments were flooding in. They messed with the wrong guy. That's Steven Seagal, a real martial artist, not just a movie hero. The way he stayed calm? That's discipline right there. Scar felt his stomach twist. He'd made a fool of himself in front of the world. One of his men said, "We should go back and apologize." Scar hesitated. His pride fought the idea, but deep down something shifted. He wasn't angry anymore, he was humbled. He exhaled slowly and said, "Yeah, let's make it right." Back at the diner, Steven had finished his coffee. He stood up slowly, nodded to the waitress, and headed outside. The sun had dipped lower now, painting the parking lot in orange and gold. Then, the rumble of motorcycles again. The same roar from earlier, but this time it didn't sound menacing. It sounded hesitant. Everyone turned as the bikes pulled up and stopped. Scar and his crew climbed off, heads low, not saying a word. Steven didn't move. He stood by his bike, his hands resting loosely at his sides. Scar approached, his voice rough but sincere. "Listen, we didn't know who you were. We were out of line." Steven studied him for a moment. Then he said, "It's not about who I am. It's about how you treat people you don't know." Scar nodded slowly, eyes down. "Yeah, you're right." There was a pause, long but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of understanding. Scar extended his hand. "No hard feelings?" Steven looked at the hand for a moment, then shook it firmly. "No hard feelings," he said. "But next time use your strength to protect, not intimidate." Scar nodded again. "Yes, sir." The crowd watching from the diner erupted in quiet applause. It wasn't just about the fight anymore. It was about the message. Respect, humility, redemption. One of the younger bikers spoke up shyly. "Hey, Mr. Seagull, you think maybe we could learn a few moves sometime?" Steven cracked a small, rare smile. "Only if you're willing to learn the right mindset first." The group chuckled nervously. Scar turned to his men and said, "You heard the man." As they got back on their bikes, Scar looked back once more and said, "You taught us something today, sir. Won't forget it." Steven nodded. Then it was worth it. The engines roared again, but this time they weren't symbols of dominance. They were symbols of respect. The bikers rode off, not as bullies, but as men who'd learned a lesson in humility. Have you ever seen someone turn an enemy into a friend, just through calm and respect? Tell me below, and don't forget to type respect if you believe true strength comes from self-control. But Steven didn't realize the video of this encounter was about to reach millions and change how the world saw him forever. By nightfall, the small-town diner was quiet again, but the rest of the world wasn't. Within hours, videos of Steven Seagal's confrontation had spread like wildfire across social media. The hashtags #RealLifeSeagal, Cheers Calm is Power, and Respect Before Violence were trending worldwide. Clips from different angles showed everything. The tense standoff, the lightning-fast wrist lock, and the way Seagal ended it all without throwing a single punch in anger. Every platform was buzzing. YouTube, Steven Seagal teaches bullies a lesson in real life. TikTok, he didn't fight, he flowed. That's martial arts. Twitter X, calm, control, and compassion. This is real discipline. By midnight, millions had watched. And what shocked people most wasn't the technique, it was his restraint. Meanwhile, Steven was back home. He sat in his dojo, a quiet wooden room filled with decades of trophies, certificates, and framed photos of students he'd trained. The light was dim, the air still. His assistant entered holding a tablet. "Sir, the video's everywhere," she said. "Even CNN's covering it." Steven gave a faint nod, eyes still closed in meditation. "I figured," he said softly. The assistant hesitated. "They're calling you the calmest man alive. People are praising your discipline." Steven opened his eyes and looked at her. "Then maybe they'll understand that martial arts isn't about fighting. It's about peace." She smiled. "You really taught that lesson today?" He stood up slowly, stretching his shoulders. "No," he said. "They taught themselves. I just held up a mirror. Across the world, people were reacting. In Japan, a martial arts master posted, 'This is what Aikido truly means. Harmony through redirection, not destruction.' In Brazil, a police academy replayed the clip during training, showing recruits how to handle aggression without escalation. In America, talk shows picked it up. One host laughed and said, Those bikers are lucky he went easy on them. That man's the real deal. And in a small apartment in Manila, a young martial arts student watched the clip again and again. His eyes sparkled with determination. One day, he whispered, "I'll be that calm." The bikers, too, were watching. They had gone silent since the incident. Scar sat alone in his garage, staring at his phone screen. The video now had 12 million views, and in the comments, people weren't mocking him. They were thanking Steven. This should be shown in schools. Real men don't lose control, they master it. That's how you deal with ego. Scar sighed and closed the app. He looked around at his motorcycle, the chains, the leather, symbols of toughness he no longer needed to prove. He picked up a small piece of paper and started writing a note. Later, he'd post it online. To Steven Seagal, "You showed me something that day. Strength isn't about how hard you hit, it's how hard you stay still. Respect." The post went viral too. People admired his humility, calling it the redemption of a biker. Back at Steven's dojo, reporters began gathering outside. Cameras flashed. Microphones pointed toward the door. A journalist called out, "Mr. Seagull, how does it feel to be a hero again?" Steven stepped out, dressed in a simple black kimono, and answered calmly, "I'm not a hero. I just live by what I teach, peace through strength." Another asked, "Would you say you were provoked?" Steven smiled faintly. "No one can provoke you if you don't let them. Anger only wins if you give it permission." That line hit headlines the next day. It became a quote plastered across motivational pages, gym walls, and TikTok edits. Even celebrities shared it. One actor wrote, "Steven Seagal just gave the world a masterclass in self-control." Have you ever been in a situation where staying calm changed everything? Tell me below what happened, and where in the world you're watching from. Remember, real strength starts within. Weeks later, the viral moment had turned into something much bigger. Martial arts schools around the world reported a surge in enrollments. Parents were signing up their kids not to fight, but to learn discipline. A documentary filmmaker even reached out, proposing a short film titled Stillness, The Way of Seagull. But Steven, as always, stayed out of the spotlight. He didn't care about interviews or fame. He just wanted people to understand the deeper truth behind the video. One evening, during a seminar for young martial artists, he addressed a quiet crowd. He said, "What you saw online wasn't a fight. It was a conversation." Their anger spoke loudly. My silence spoke louder. The students sat in awe. He continued, "Never confuse peace for weakness. Peace is a choice. It takes far more power to hold it than to break it." The room erupted in applause, not the loud kind, but the heartfelt kind. As the applause faded, Steven bowed his head. The viral moment had come and gone, but its message had taken root. Later that night, alone in his dojo, he lit a single candle. The flame flickered steady and strong, just like his spirit. He whispered softly, "Control yourself, and you control the world." The light reflected off his eyes, calm, steady, and unshaken. But as the video spread further, not everyone reacted with admiration. Some wanted to test the legend themselves. And Steven was ready. Weeks passed since the viral video shook the internet. Steven Seagal had returned to his quiet routine: early morning meditation, hours of Aikido practice, then teaching small classes in his dojo. But the world outside wasn't so quiet anymore. His inbox was overflowing with interview requests, event invitations, and sponsorship offers. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. The man who humbled a biker gang without throwing a single punch. Yet along with admiration came something else. Skepticism. On social media, a few self-proclaimed martial artists began posting videos. "That wasn't real Aikido. He got lucky." Bet he couldn't handle a real fighter. At first, Steven ignored it. He'd seen this pattern before, and the louder the noise, the smaller the spirit behind it. But one particular name kept appearing in headlines: Eli the Cobra Ramirez, a former MMA brawler known for his aggressive fighting style and brutal knockouts. Eli went viral himself when he challenged Steven Seagal publicly in a live stream. "That video was fake, man. Seagal ain't no real fighter, he's an actor. Let's see what happens when he steps into a real ring." Millions tuned in. Comment sections exploded. Seagal would never do it. He doesn't need to. "I'd pay to see this." For days, Steven said nothing. Then, one quiet afternoon as he finished class at his dojo, a young student ran in holding a phone. "Sensei," the boy said breathlessly. "That MMA fighter. He's outside." Steven frowned slightly. "Outside?" The boy nodded. "He's in the parking lot, and there's a camera crew with him." Outside, Eli the Cobra stood tall, lean, tattooed, and confident. His crew was filming live, broadcasting everything on social media. "Look who it is," Eli said into the camera. "The man, the myth, the movie star." Steven stepped out calmly, dressed in his simple black gi, his long hair tied back. "I didn't invite cameras," he said evenly. Eli smirked. "You didn't need to. The world wants to see if you're real." Steven sighed quietly, walking closer until they stood only a few feet apart. "You misunderstand martial arts," he said. "It's not about proving, it's about knowing." Eli crossed his arms. "Sounds like an excuse." Steven studied him for a moment. The man's eyes were sharp but restless, filled with ego, not awareness. "You want to test yourself?" Steven asked calmly. "Yeah," Eli said, grinning. "Let's see if that Aikido stuff works on a real fighter." Steven nodded slowly. "Very well. But no anger, just technique," Eli laughed. "Whatever you say, old man." The crew backed up, cameras rolling. The crowd on the live stream swelled past 1 million viewers within minutes. Eli raised his hands into a fighter's stance, bouncing lightly on his feet. Steven stood completely still, breathing slow, relaxed. Eli lunged first, fast and brutal. A jab, a hook, a kick, but Steven's body moved like water, smooth, efficient, effortless. He redirected each strike with minimal motion, letting Eli's momentum work against him. Then, with a simple step forward and a twist of his wrist, Steven sent Eli tumbling to the mat with a thud. The crowd gasped. The camera shook. Eli scrambled back up, red-faced. "Lucky shot," he growled, charging again. Steven sidestepped, catching his arm and turning it gently, the same controlled motion he'd used with the bikers. This time Eli ended up face down on the mat, arm locked but unhurt. Steven released him instantly and stepped back. "You rely too much on power," he said quietly. "You can't control others until you control yourself." Eli stood, panting heavily. The arrogance in his eyes began to fade, replaced by confusion and respect. He nodded slowly. "You're fast. I didn't even see it coming." Steven smiled faintly. "You weren't meant to. You were too busy trying to win." What do you think is real strength about domination or discipline? Comment below what you would have done in Eli's place. And type calm if you believe control is the greatest power. The live stream chat exploded with comments. "He did it again." "Seagull's the real deal. This man's energy is unreal." But Steven wasn't gloating. He walked over to Eli and extended his hand. "Thank you," he said simply. "Every opponent is a teacher." Eli shook his hand, still breathing hard. "Guess I still have a lot to learn." Steven nodded. "We all do." The camera zoomed in on that handshake, the veteran master and the humbled fighter. It was more powerful than any knockout. The clip would go on to break records. It wasn't just another viral fight. It was a lesson in humility broadcast to millions. When asked later why he accepted the challenge, Steven simply replied, "Because peace needs to be tested, or it means nothing." That night, news anchors discussed the event. Analysts debated his technique. Fighters praised his precision. But Steven stayed silent back in his dojo, sweeping the mats alone. His assistant entered and said softly, "You just proved your mastery again?" He smiled. "No," he said. "I just proved that peace still wins, even in a world that celebrates chaos." He placed his broom aside and bowed before the empty mat. But Steven had no idea. His calm lesson that day would become something far greater than a viral moment. It would become a global movement. The world couldn't stop talking. The footage of Steven Seagal's encounter with Eli the Cobra Ramirez had shattered viewership records. More than 100 million people had seen it within the first week. Not because of the fight itself, but because of what it represented. Every clip, every repost, every commentary had one theme in common. Real strength isn't in domination. It's in discipline. News outlets called it the Seagull philosophy. Schools started using the clip in assemblies. Martial arts academies were flooded with new students, not to learn how to fight, but how to stay calm under pressure. Steven, however, had retreated from all the noise. He stayed in his dojo, training the next generation quietly, far from the flashing cameras. To him, nothing had changed. The world might have discovered a viral hero, but he was just a man doing what he'd always done, living by his code. One cool morning, as sunlight poured through the dojo windows, Steven was guiding a group of children through basic Aikido drills. Their movements were clumsy, awkward, but full of heart. He smiled softly. "Remember," he said, his voice calm but firm, "you don't move to strike. You move to connect." A small boy raised his hand. "Sensei, is that what you did with the biker man?" The class giggled. Steven chuckled lightly. "Something like that," he said. "I connected, not with fists, but with purpose." The children nodded, not fully understanding yet, but feeling the wisdom behind his words. Outside, the world had changed because of him. Clips of his calm demeanor were now part of motivational videos titled, "The Art of Stillness," "Discipline over Drama," "How Steven Seagal Taught the World to Breathe." Celebrities quoted him. Teachers used his story to inspire students to handle bullies with calmness. Even corporate trainers began opening meetings with his now famous quote, "No one can provoke you if you don't let them." It wasn't just a moment anymore. It had become a movement. Meanwhile, Scar, the biker leader from that first encounter, was also living differently. He had cut ties with his gang and opened a small community gym called the Dojo Garage. On the wall hung a simple framed photo, Steven shaking his hand. Underneath it, a plaque read, "Respect begins where ego ends." Local kids came there after school, some to learn boxing, others just to stay off the streets. Scar taught them not to fight to win, but to defend wisely. One day, during an interview, a journalist asked him, "What changed you?" Scar smiled faintly. "A man who didn't have to hurt me to teach me," he said. "That's real power." Back at Steven's dojo, visitors began arriving from around the world. Students, fighters, and even skeptics who had once mocked him. They came not for spectacle, but for stillness. They wanted to feel that energy, that quiet presence that had humbled bikers, fighters, and millions online. Steven always greeted them the same way. No ego, no ceremony, no spotlight. Just a bow and the words "Welcome, leave your anger at the door, audience engagement break for YouTube." If the world learned to respond with calm instead of rage, how different would life be? Tell me your thoughts below and type "respect" if you believe peace is the ultimate strength. One evening, Steven was invited to a global peace summit in Tokyo. He almost declined, but a personal letter changed his mind. It was from a young martial artist who wrote, "Your video stopped me from making a terrible mistake. I was angry, lost. Then I saw how you stayed calm when others tried to provoke you. It showed me another way. Thank you." Steven folded the letter carefully and placed it in his pocket. He decided to attend. At the summit, he spoke not as a celebrity, but as a teacher, standing before leaders, monks, and martial arts masters from across the world. He said, "Peace isn't something you talk about. It's something you practice. Every moment you choose calm over anger, you make the world stronger." He paused, scanning the faces in the audience. A fight ends in seconds, but control lasts a lifetime. The room erupted in applause, quiet, respectful, and full of emotion. Later, as Steven walked alone through the gardens outside, cherry blossoms fell around him like soft snow. He stopped near a pond, watching the reflection of the moon ripple gently across the water. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he whispered, "If calm can change one man, it can change the world." He closed his eyes, breathing deeply. The same stillness that had guided him from that day at the diner to this moment of peace. The wind stirred gently, carrying his words into the night. If you believe no one should ever be judged by appearance, and that true strength lies in control, not aggression, type "respect" in the comments. And if you felt inspired by this story, subscribe for more real stories of courage, calm, and character.